Hey everyone, in today's video I'll be going over a Deathstroke themed build. And you can do some pretty good damage with it, like you're not going to have any issues at all with taking down even the strongest enemies in the game. Now don't forget to subscribe for more weekly content, because if you don't...
Now hold on a bloody minute!
If you find this video enjoyable, I have tons of other build related videos on my channel, if you want to check those out afterwards. Well, saying all of that, let's dive into the build starting off with Deathstroke's swords. So he's actually had quite a few different swords that I've seen, but the ones I've chosen to go with are his katana versions. Not one, but two of them. We're also going to use the lightning variations on them because I found that using this is much more effective than the keen versions because you do get a bit more damage out of it, and you're able to buff lightning attacks a lot more than just regular basic attacks. Also, a little bonus to them is they passively come with a little bit of bleed buildup, so we can proc a blood loss usually once or twice during a boss fight for some extra damage. Now the last thing for the katanas is their Ash of War. So the one in our main hand, we can go with Unsheathe because it's got good damage, speed, and personally I just like the whole movement of it. Or another really good option would be Sword Dance. You're able to get a bit more damage out of it and costs less mana to use, but the drawback to it is a two-part Ash of War, meaning it'll take longer to use its full attack. That's why I prefer Unsheath more, because it's very quick and it still does a lot of damage. You can also throw on the Shard of Alexander to add an extra 15% damage to Ashes of War to make them more powerful and just a lot more satisfying to use. So that's everything for his swords, so let's move on to his other close range weapon, his staff. For that, we can use the TWINBLADE. It's probably the closest looking weapon we can get to a staff while being extremely functional. Like, you can use this or the katanas and you'll still have no problem killing whoever. Again, we're going to be using the lightning variation because it does more damage and it's easily buffable. For example, using the lightning scorpion charm is going to add an extra 12% damage to all of our attacks, because it increases lightning damage after all. And honestly, the best way to use this weapon, which I think is the most satisfying way as well, is to use its fully charged heavy attack. Your character does a little spin doing what looks like 5 attacks in a quick motion. And when you combine this with the Rotten Wing Talisman, you're racking those damage numbers up really fast. Because if you didn't know, the Rotten Wing Talisman increases our damage with rapid attacks. And I just finished telling you that this weapon can do 4 or 5 attacks in an instant, so it'll be pretty nice. Lastly, we have the Ash of War for it. You can go with Sword Dance or Spinning Slash to do some good damage, but personally I prefer Phantom Slash. It has tons of range, damage, and it just looks really cool. Your character sends out a ghost that dashes forward to attack your target before you do the exact same move, following up for more damage. And what's great about this is you can cast it a second time to repeat that attack as if doing it once wasn't enough. It's just a fun and effective Ash of War to use, and I don't get why, but people don't use this very often. Well, that's everything for his close range weapons, so let's get into his medium to long range weapons because he uses an array of guns. And for that, we can use the Pulley's crossbow. I'll be honest, it's not that powerful, so it's mainly going to be used to poke at enemies from a distance, finishing a boss fight if you're low on health, and proccing a bleed buildup with bleed bolts. So we're not going to be depending on this too much, but it is there for us to use. I mean, the bleed bolts work fantastic because our katanas also have a little bit of bleed buildup on them. So after a few swings, shoot a few bolts, and proc a blood loss for huge damage while being safe from a distance. But the next thing we can use as his grenades are the freezing pots, and these do wonders for us. We can usually proc a freeze buildup on a boss with 1 to maximum 3 pots, very quick and easy. So now that boss is going to take an additional 20% increased damage from everything for 30 seconds. So not only does that help you out, but your teammates as well. Just a solid item to have on you. Now I think that covers all of his damage, so let's move on to his powers that make him so strong. We can't get the same thing that he has, but the next best thing we can use are buffs. And what I mean by that is the spell Golden Vow. It's going to increase our damage output by 15% and all of our damage negation by 10% for 80 seconds. So this is something you'll want to use right before boss fights. And I'm just using the finger seal because there isn't anything that's really going to benefit us, and its stat requirements are pretty low to use it. Now we got the last thing to increase our damage, and that's with the Flask of Wondrous Physic. The best two tiers you'll want to use are the Lightning-Shrouding tier. That's going to add an extra 20% damage to all lightning attacks, or in other words, all of our basic attacks. And the Thorny Crack tier that works in the exact same way as the Rotten Wing Talisman, increasing our damage with successive attacks. And both of these tiers last for 3 minutes, which is really nice. Now let me just get the last talisman out of the way so I can get into the armor and then the minimum stats required. The last talisman being MILLICENT'S Prothesis. It's going to do the exact same thing as the Thorny Crack tier and the Rotten Wing Talisman, but it also increases our dex by 5 levels for even more damage. Next up, we have his armor, and the closest looking thing to his black and orange look is the Royal Remains set. Unfortunately, there's nothing to match his helmet, but we can match his face with a short haircut, eye patch, beard, and goatee. None of this offers any buffs or bonuses at all, and it's all simply for cosmetic purposes only. Well, we finally made it to the minimum stats required. You'll need at least 16 strength, 18 dex, and 25 faith to use all of his weapons and spell. Afterwards, I'd recommend putting majority of your points into dex to further increase your damage. I'm also going to put links in the description down below for all the gear I'm using, if you want more information on them and where you can find them all for yourselves. So that's everything for today's video. I'd also like to give a big thanks to the members of my channel for supporting me on my videos and the future ones to come. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.